Great.
Okay.
Right.
Right. I'm here with Steve Hackett to talk about the release of his new album, Genesis Revisited 2. Steve, congratulations. It is an absolutely gorgeous album to listen to.
Glad you like it. Thank you. Thank you.
I expected it to be a throwback to 1975.
Yeah.
But it actually is. It's not. It's a lot more than that. Can you say what was the reason behind doing it?
Well, it's a funny thing, but I was in this very studio in Planet Rock where we're filming, and I was doing an interview with Nicky Horn about a year ago, and he was playing the Chamber of 32 Doors when I came in, and at the end of it he said, "I think this sounds absolutely wonderful." It was the original mix, and I said, "Yeah, I agree, it sounds wonderful." Hearing it through, either through radio or compressed through their desk, there was something about it being screwed up into a tight ball of sound, and I think he was playing it off CD rather than vinyl, because the original pressing was pretty scratchy and a bit hot and a bit, you know, so it sounded super clean but really ballsy. But I said, "Yeah, I think it sounds wonderful too, lovely song," but I was never happy with the fact, with my guitar playing on it, you know. It was good enough, but I always needed one note to sustain and scream, a bit like the vocal does, you know, that there are a couple of really, you know, held vocal notes that are just beautiful, with sort of, it's a held note and there's another one coming up behind. And I wanted the same effect on the guitar. And of course, in those days, I couldn't quite get it to sustain, I couldn't get it to work in the way I wanted to. I recorded it loads of times back then, you know, trying to get the opening phrase right, I could never get the timing right. And I recorded it again, I struggled with the same phrases, but these days I play, for the most part, a Fernandez Sustainer model guitar, Les Paul shape, but it's got feedback on board on the thing, so I don't have to deafen anyone to get that sound. Most of the time these days I record rock guitar really quietly in the studio, because I don't want to fool myself and anyone else with volume. You know, sometimes you know, being in the studio before and everyone's got the speakers cranked up and you think it's sounding more powerful because you're listening to it loud. But the secret of a powerful sounding recording is, does it still sound powerful when you're playing it at low level? So I'm taking the modern approach to all this, and I'm very computer reliant rather than amp reliant these days. I've got my favourite pedals, and that's about as far as it goes. I've got a Sounds amp, which is a nice little device that's the size of a cigar packet, that like a little sort of box of Panatellas or something, and that makes a very nice distortion sound, very smooth, like tube distortion. And I've got another box built by a guy called Pete Cornish, called an Iron Boost pedal, and the combination of those two makes the guitar sound as if it's, you know, a couple of Marshalls hooked up in series. It's really screws it up into a tight ball, makes it really powerful and screamy. So a combination of those plus amp plugins and Apple Mac Logic. I know it doesn't sound as exciting to say that as, yeah, I've got a Marshall cranked up to 11 and everyone has to stand back, and you know, the engineer mics it up and then runs in fear of his hearing in case I even tune up, you know, and that's how it was in the old days, and I suspect most guitarists function like that, in sort of vintage mode like that even now. But I like to use modern technology to get those old sounds, but have them more under control than they ever were, really.
I guess back in the day, you actually had to really struggle physically to get the sound out. Now you understand what it is that you're trying to produce, and you can apply technology to it.
Yeah, I mean, it used to take about an hour to half an hour or so in the old days, you'd plug in an amp, the mic wouldn't be quite in the right place, you'd move the amp around the studio. Parquet flooring was always a bit of a favourite, and sticking a mic over the back of the cabinet so it picked up some of the floor and increased the woodiness of the sound. And that gave it that slightly violin-y quality, but I found that you can get that, you know, with
a decent plug-in.
With a decent plug-in, yeah, you know, and with digital reverb effects. So there's a lot you can do. You can move the mic virtually within the box if you want. Moving the mic is really funny. When Roger King said I've changed the sound, and he was laughing. He said, I've just moved the mic. You know, this picture of a mic that's moved. So yeah, you know, I try and, if I can, I try and flood it in effect to make it sound big. But you know, there's this whole sort of argument about, oh, to get a great sound, you need to move air. And I think I've proved that you don't need to move air to get a great sound. You just need to think creatively and use artificial space. Use all the technology that's out there. By all means, A/B it and see if you can get a better sound with an amp being tortured to death in the corner. But I don't think you need to anymore.
But of course, the important thing is you actually understand the sound you're trying to produce,
and you can hear it.
Yeah.
You know, a lot of the time, you know, my studio. I've got a studio that's on 2 floors, and we hear the amp thumping through the floor when I've got it cranked up to buggery. And but we're hearing the same sound with the computer. And I said to Roger again, I can't believe I'm not hearing it thumping through the floor, because it's got that thump to it that we get when we hear it, when we listen to it back when I'm not performing. It's got all that weight. It's got all of that, you know, all of that lovely weight.
That's good. That's cool. I mean, you started with Chamber 32.
Yes.
And then it just went on and on.
Yeah. Well, originally I thought I'll just choose my favourite Genesis tracks, the ones I had not looked at on the first Revisited, which happened in 1996.
Watch for the Skies.
Watch for the Skies, Firth the Fifth, Fountain of Salmacis, to mention some biggies from that early epic era. And I looked at the ones that were left, that were still epic in nature, such as Supper's Ready, of course. And then little tracks like Horizons, which acts as a kind of hors d'oeuvre for Supper's Ready. But they're forever twinned, though, those two. You kind of can't have one without the other, I think. Then there were all the other tracks. I just really chose tracks that I liked myself. And then once I'd agreed that with Inside Out and Century Media, our record companies, I was talking to EMI, a guy called Jason Day, A&R at EMI, and he said, no, I think you should record tracks where the guitar is absolutely crucial to the plot. You know, do the tracks that are the most guitaristic. And I might be doing myself a disservice here, but I think that Genesis was never really a guitarist band. If you look at what we used to call a guitar-based number, it normally meant something that used 1, 2, 3 12 strings all chiming away at once. I think that it was, you know, keyboard that predominated much of the time, and you had to fit guitars around that. So, and I was allowed a guitar solo sometimes, but a lot of the time, you know, they didn't really want a guitar hero. They wanted a band of accompanists, and sometimes that stretched into the idea of the band functioning as an ensemble and sounding very powerful musically, but I don't think it was a guitar heroes band. That was a little difficult for me because I wanted to be able to play heroically, if not to strut my stuff, at least to play melodically and impress some kind of personality on it. But a lot of the time with guitar work, I had to think very hard, what can the guitar do that the trio isn't already doing? You've got it all covered by busy keyboards, bass and drums. At times hardly enough room for vocal, let alone what the lead guitar was going to do. So sometimes I'd have to double what the bass was doing. Other times I'd be doing a little bit of shading in the left-hand corner, a little bit of a sort of shimmer or something like that, and I'd have to think very, very hard, peering into the corners of the instrument to see what can it do. So I had to really scratch my head.
Of course, that was the period of Wakeman, Keith Emerson.
Yes.
Keyboards were everywhere.
Yes. I think if I looked at the various decades, I'd say guitar development in the 60s through the blues. The guitar started to develop sonically and became the wonderful machine, the sound we know and love now. Starting with the four guitarists I can think of straight away. Of course it was Clapton, of course it was Beck, of course it was Peter Green, of course it was Jimi Hendrix. And sonically, where those guys took the guitar was nobody's business. And I'll always love them all for that. Then in the 70s, it's the era of keyboard supremacy in a way, because keyboards could not only do what the mellotron did, which was to do a passable impression of a symphony orchestra, but also, with synth as well, the keyboards could suddenly bend notes and do all of that sort of stuff. So, kind of tubular bells onwards. The die was cast for a legion of keyboard gods. Then the 80s, the fight back from drums, and I think that both Gabriel and Collins on Pete's third album with Intruder, No Self-Control, ultra compressed drums, stone rooms, all of that. Suddenly drums were doing half the work. Suddenly drummers weren't as busy, but they were powering through with cannons. And you had that sort of sense of everyone following the template that had been laid down perhaps by Zeppelin with Kashmir, that sort of sound, and suddenly that was de rigueur, and it changed. That kind of dictated the form. I think that album was the sound of the 80s. It was released in 1980, I believe, and so that. Then we're into the 90s, and suddenly the whole sort of samplistic culture had been played out via Art of Noise and the whole kind of 80s, the big snare, big hair, the whole deal there, and
everything electronic.
Yeah, and then and everything very, very bright and very, very tizzy, and everything, every record was a radio mix. I think a lot of the warmth perhaps had been lost at the expense of extreme clarity. Guitar sound started to get thinner. Then I think over the last 20 years there seems to have been that fight back of real instruments and how can we make things sound good, how can we warm up the voice. Anyway, that's just my own perception of it, but a reappraisal and the use of real instruments again and orchestras coming back into suddenly nothing is out of fashion anymore. You can be a punk, you can do prog. It doesn't matter. You're not having to.
In fact, you can even be a punk prog.
Yeah.
Or a punk progger.
Why not?
I've been listening to a lot of young bands at the moment who are incorporating everything.
Yeah, why not?
They don't care where it comes from.
Yes.
If it sounds good, they'll do it.
Why not? I think absolutely right. I was thinking, in terms of the progressive scene having influenced the mainstream and impinging upon it in such a big way that everyone wants to sound like Muse now. A band that one minute will sound like it could be Prince doing the vocal, and the next minute it goes off into a piece of Chopin, and it's all grist for the mill, isn't it? It's all welcome. So suddenly Chopin's having a hit this week, and that so it's a great position, I think, for music to be in. In a way, it's back to the sort of 60s psychedelia. Everything goes. There are no rules anymore. The monopolies via the large companies, I think, serve to have better distribution. But in terms of artists going their own sweet way, it's not just the old guard such as myself, but no one's going to tell a 21-year-old, what kind of music to do anymore. It just doesn't work like that anymore. The 80s was like that.
Simon Cowell probably gets away with it, but that is a very limited sphere of music.
Well, it's only a branch of what's going on. It's not the whole thing, or else I wouldn't be in the charts with an album that stuff that was, condemned to the slag heap decades ago as being far too complex, pompous, and any other mud that you want to sling.
And it is very much in the charts and doing brilliant business as well.
It is doing very good business. I'm very happy that my idea was vindicated, and that pan-genre approach is being vindicated, that you don't just have to do music in one style. You can do what the hell you want, and if you want to do trad jazz with a dance beat, go ahead, mate. No one's going to stop you.
Yeah. I mean, silly question, but were you aiming it at old Genesis fans, or are you looking to find a whole new sphere of fans for the music?
Well, if it was to go out there and get a whole new generation of listeners, that would be extraordinary. See, I don't know who buys things that are in the charts. I don't have the information, that demographic. I don't know. It could be old listeners, but they won't sustain that interest in that. They'll buy it and then it'll stop. All I know is that it was in the midweek charts at number 8, and then it settled down, and we thought it would be a more realistic position after that, because it was up against the likes of Coldplay and new acts that I don't even know the name of, but who've all got huge budgets, whereas this was a small company. I won't say it was a small team that made it, because there are about 35 people on the thing, many of whom are at least as well known as me, and in many cases more well known. So I was very lucky to get the team on the thing. So they did a great job. People such as Nick Kershaw. You might think of him as an 80s figure, but he's enjoying a resurgence of interest at the moment.
No shortage of talent.
No shortage of talent. Fabulously talented, great voice, great guitar, great songs. John Wetton, who people might think of as from the same era as me, 70s, but again enjoying a resurgence. I mean, Asia are a very busy band these days before they reformed to do that. So. I think they've got all the work they can handle and then some. And there's many other people.
Well, you've got people like Stephen Wilson.
Stephen Wilson, yes.
And Mikhail
Ackerfeld, yeah. Ackerfeld. That's right. Yeah, he's on it, and a great singer, Michael, and I've really enjoyed working with Stephen Wilson on some of his stuff. So we tend to sort of show up on each other's things now. There's a camaraderie in the industry that at one time was not there. I think no more so than I think in the 70s and the 80s. You had guys who were signed to labels, and then suddenly they couldn't do work with you. Like, for instance, Ian MacDonald. I was a huge fan of Ian with King Crimson.
Yep.
The first Crimson album in the court, and I befriended him just after he'd left the band, and when I was still with Genesis, he said, "Oh, if you want any flute or anything at some point," and I said, "Oh, I'll take you up on that at some point." And then at the point when I was in a position to be able to invite him to do something, he said, "Well, I can't really do anything at the moment because I'm with Foreigner, and that means I'm prevented from my record company from showing up on anyone's product."
Yeah.
And that's how it used to work. You know, the record companies used to sit on their artists rather like Dragon's Gold. And it may well be that the Americans still function like that. I don't know, but it's old school thinking, because these days you show up on someone's album and their audience like it. It acts as an advert. You know, it's the best way of working. So I enjoy working on other people's things, although I'm pretty much totally committed now, so I'm having to say no to people. I've got a lot of favours to repay on this album.
I heard some work that you did recently with Life Signs.
Yeah.
Which I was super chuffed.
Doesn't that sound great?
It's
yes.
A gorgeous album.
That's gorgeous, isn't it? Yes. Is it been released?
I believe Esoteric are releasing it in January or February.
Right. I mean, I loved the material, and I thought John Young and Nick Beggs together sound wonderful, don't they? They're just great combination of voices, wonderful harmonies.
Yeah.
Sound really, really fantastic. So I've done a bit on that. I would have liked to have done more, but it was actually quite self-sufficient sounding, and I thought, oh, where do I find my opening on these things? You know, they sound very good already.
Yeah.
Great long tracks, isn't it? You know,
absolutely.
Very spacey.
Yeah, I went up to Liscombe Park the other week to get a listen to it.
Right.
It's absolutely gorgeous.
You've actually heard the finished thing, have you?
It may still be going through a little bit of work, but I think it's a nice.
Yes, I'd like to hear it. It would be nice.
That's excellent. What's been the reaction of the other members of Genesis?
You know, I haven't spoken to them. I don't know. You'd have to ask them.
Did you not need to get their permission to do this?
No, because if they record something of mine, they don't ask my permission either. So we wrote this stuff together.
So you all own it?
Yeah, we all, allow each other to do this. You know, when they were on stage doing their Reformation some years ago, they were showing films of me with them and Pete with the band, and so we don't stand in each other's way as regards that. No, and there's another way of looking at it as well from a business point of view. Of course, they sold lots of records that I then continue to get royalties from. So one hand washes the other, and as I sell this, they will get royalties from it. So it's handy for that loft conversion.
Won't do them any harm.
I don't think it'll hurt them. No.
You're going to be touring this early next year, is it, or mid next year?
Yes, I am. Yeah, I'm starting off, funnily enough, doing a cruise. The first show we're doing with this lineup of Revisited. We're doing a thing called Cruise to the Edge with Yes and UK and Carl Palmer's band and Saga.
Good grief.
Good grief, I know, it's a 5-day cruise and it sounds like it'll be non-stop music. I believe each of the bands is contracted to do 2 shows and possibly an acoustic one, so I don't know if anyone will be suntanning themselves on deck or...
I thought the jamming would be pretty impressive.
Well, it would be nice, wouldn't it, if everyone just got on stage and jammed with each other. But proggers aren't always, proggers of the Caribbean aren't always known for their ability to be able to jam. I'm always up for that. I might not know their songs, but I can make a few noises on them. There you go.
That's all
It'll
good.
be fun, wouldn't it? Yeah.
And the first land gigs are?
The first land gigs, there may be American stuff that follows, or we may defer those offers to happen in September. But I've got European stuff happening in France, Germany. There's an Austrian one confirmed today. Italy. I know that we're negotiating with the Scandinavians. So it goes on, and it's growing for me next year. There's a Mexican date, there are Canadian dates, there's a festival happening in LA. I think that's towards the end of the year, or certainly California. So
And the UK?
Yeah, UK. I've got UK dates, which I can mention.
Please.
London at Hammersmith on the 10th of May. 11th of May, Cardiff, St David's Hall. 12th of May, Liverpool, the Philharmonic. 14th, Glasgow, Royal Concert Hall. Gateshead, the Sage, on the 15th of May. 16th is Birmingham, the Symphony Hall. Many of these are nearly sold out.
It's great.
Which is great. It's extraordinary. It's done great business already, which is fantastic for me and the team, of course.
Who's the band going to be?
The band is on vocals Nad Sylvan of Agents of Mercy. He sounds, in a way, he's got that Genesis voice. He's got that sort of slightly Pete, slightly Phil, slightly Genesis. You know, a lot Genesis, I would say. Big voice. Gary O'Toole, who's got a wonderful voice himself, who sings 3 of the tracks on the album as well, is on drums. Gary on drums, Lee Pomeroy on bass, who's playing with It Bites and Take That, doing huge business, but he's put that to one side and he's concentrating on this for the year. So he's turning down big money to do this, which is fantastic. We've got Roger King on keyboards. I had hoped that we would have Amanda Lehman, who's been with my band for the past few years, but she's got commitments to her son and her mother, who is not enjoying the greatest of health at the moment. So, you know, yeah, she's got a small child. You know, you have to get real about this stuff. Do you know what I mean? I think,
Yep.
I think under those circumstances, she's made the right choice. But I've said that there's always a place for her. You know, with my band, she's singing a couple of tracks on the album. Plus, you know, there will be new stuff in the future. So I'm dedicating the whole of next year to live performances of this album and its predecessor, number 1, and the occasional other Genesis song that we haven't included with it. But it's worth doing that. You know, there's a lot of great stuff to draw from.
I think you've drawn from an awful lot of it on this album.
Yeah, it's ended up being much longer than I thought.
It's all good. It really is. Steve, I'm down to my last couple of seconds of memory.
Right.
That's been absolutely
Thank
superb.
you.
Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you.
Good luck with the album, and I hope to see you in May at Hammersmith.
Thank you, Andy. Thank you very much. Cheers, mate.
It's been great. Thank you very much indeed.
Cheers.
Cheers.